Welcome to the Epoch Creative Podcast, guys. I have a special guest here, Josh Fryfogle, who is a Lucedale native originally, but a long-term resident, right, of Alaska?
Alaska, yes.
At this point. So we're going to jump into his story. He is an entrepreneur, a business owner, a musician, a videographer, a graphic designer, a writer, a paper owner, and there's something else I'm missing. Radio station owner. There it was.
Right.
So
A lot of stuff.
a man after my own heart, actually, because I feel like I'm all those things, but I don't own a paper and a radio station. But who knows? Maybe I will one day.
I'm not really a graphic designer. Everything else was accurate.
Okay, my bad. I just saw so much graphics on your website. I was like, okay.
You know, I have guys that work for me, Bryce and Mark, and they are top notch.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. Like when you can build out a team when it's available, which is hard in a small town, which we're going to get into all of that. But before we get into Josh's journey and kind of how we met, I think is interesting. I do want to plug our sponsor, which is Opossum Coffee. You've never seen a plug this good. I mean, look at the background, look at the coffee. Make sure you go to opossumcoffeecompany.com and order some of their coffee. I have 2 bags of this in my house, and it is absolutely amazing. We're actually sitting inside of their new coffee roasting factory.
Nice.
What do you think about it?
You know, I love the high ceilings. I think it's somewhere you could hang out.
Well, yeah, and that's the idea for this room. You know, the roastery room is just over there. This room is kind of open
Like a public thing?
I'm not sure what the plan is. You know, you got the 2 big garage doors that open up, which is really cool. I know that they personally, as a family, have had events here, whether it be birthday parties or whatever. We actually talked about, I have a 22-foot inflatable screen that I rent out.
Nice.
And a projector.
You could put it right over there.
You could put a projector in here. You could have some events. I think there's going to be a lot of cool stuff going on here. But the first thing I want to talk about is how we actually met. And making sure my mic is recording, guys. This is kind of a makeshift setup at the moment. But I was actually filming an episode of a web series we're doing about this roastery. And I happened to be on Main Street in Lucedale tying my shoe while my camera was sitting on the ground. And this guy says, "Hey, what are you doing? What are you filming?" And I told you what I was doing, but it's just kind of funny. That's how we met. When was that? Last Friday?
Yeah, I think so. It's been about a week, maybe.
I don't even know if it's been a week yet, but either way, I have not known Josh very long, but I've gotten to know him. And funny enough, we know a lot of people in the same space, being musicians, but anyways, can you talk to us a little bit about what you do? Give us kind of the bio. I know it's a big thing, but just kind of introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, if I was going to explain, it sounds like a lot when you list it out like you just did, but the truth is, I started as a musician, and then I discovered that I needed to build pathways to get from A to B if I was going to succeed in music. So the more I studied the music industry, the more I realized it was very corrupt, and it was a bottleneck that prevents local people from accessing local media for music. And it hit me one day early on back in my 20s that the best route to success would be to make a scene locally, to forget completely about the mythology of all these movies about how the artist is plucked from obscurity by some brilliant businessman who sees potential in them. Just forget that myth and focus on what would you do as a musician culturally at a local level to get your music out to your neighbors, forgetting the world at large and super fame. Yeah. And so I came up with this idea. I called it Make a Scene, and it started as an event production company. And so we put on some successful events. We got shut down by the fire marshal a few times. It was very successful until it wasn't.
Sure.
But then I realized what it really boiled down to, the biggest bully pulpit we have in this country is media. So I started writing a weekly music column for the daily paper there in Wasilla, Alaska, the Frontiersman. And every week on Friday, I would write about local music. And I always ended the column with the phrase "make a scene." And I would always write from that perspective of who's doing what and how and why. And so I did that for 3 years. Then I started my own publication called Makeascene Magazine. Has a ring to it.
I like it.
Yeah.
And I also downloaded it.
And I've been doing that for 17 years. So for 17 years, once a month, what I do is I get all of my content from local people. Long before Twitter became popular, back in the MySpace days,
Sure.
I realized that social media could be done in any medium. And the internet doesn't have to be the medium itself. It can be the tool that helps us do it in all mediums. So I thought, I'm going to print a publication, Makeascene Magazine, and I'm going to invite all the musicians in my community to write about each other, to write about themselves, to write about their lives, what they care about, and start simply making people aware of local music and its value and where it's coming from. Because in most communities everywhere, you don't know anything about local music, because the mainstream media cannot sell you their favorite music that they make money off of, that their friends make money off of, if we're giving listening time to our neighbors and cutting them out of the economic transaction. So I found out, unfortunately, that musicians are just as susceptible to the myth as regular people.
Yeah.
And it was very hard it still is difficult for some musicians to understand what we're doing. But something interesting happened. The art community at large, theater, sculptures, all the different arts, they got it immediately.
Yeah.
So Makeascene Magazine, which was intended for music, it ended up being all about art in general. Yeah, the artist community got it right off the bat, it seemed like. And so, much to my frustration, honestly. I mean, I was very glad to see that it was working, but I was very disappointed to see that my fellow musicians were still locked into that way of thinking, that it was, you must suffer in obscurity until someone plucks you from it and shows the world your greatness, right? That's the myth. But the more I learned about the music business, the more I saw that that wasn't the case. That wasn't the way it worked. The music business didn't discover the Seattle sound, for example. I always thought that someone discovered it. No, they finally acknowledged it when they couldn't ignore it. The Seattle scene was an independent thing done by Sub Pop Records and other people, but Sub Pop was instrumental in creating a scene. They made a scene where they were. And eventually, the music industry said, this is nothing like what we're pushing, but we've got to buy it. We got to stop it from becoming independent and not needing us.
Yeah.
So they stepped in and started offering deals to these bands so that they could discover a scene. But you don't discover a scene. Like, I can understand discovering an artist in obscurity.
Yeah.
But discovering a scene, no, that means they already built it before you showed up. So that's what happened in the 90s with my generation. And so I started putting the pieces together that there's no such thing as a music scene. There's a culture. Mm-hmm. And the culture either acknowledges the local musicians and their music or it does not.
Yeah.
But it's up to the music community to engage the culture locally, neighbor to neighbor.
Well, let me ask you this, because this kind of bridges into something that I've been thinking about lately. In today's age with the internet, social media, YouTube, I feel like the traditional, model of the big corporations owning all media, whether it be filmmaking, whether it be music, journalism, I think it's shifting back to the people in that way because of the internet. So what do you think? I feel like the tools are more readily available, and there's no better time in history of the world to just literally do it.
Well, and I guess what my company does, I feel like we complete the circuit. What we're talking about is access to the internet, the ability for individual people to interact in real time. But the problem with the internet that's been revealed, especially over the last 4 years, but that I've been saying for a very long time, is that it creates the perfect control system. And
everybody's in one place.
Well, and whoever they don't want on the internet, they've shown us that they can remove them. And they haven't even shown us the full capability. The truth is, the people in power could access the network itself and block any IP address. They could block, not only could they take you off the internet, they could stop you from accessing the internet. The internet is so easy to take away, is my point. Traditional mediums like radio and print at a local level, if they are repurposed for social media, if they turn into social media, they do very well. Like my print publication, Makeascene magazine and the People's Paper. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But we have continued to grow in an industry that everyone says is dying.
Yeah.
The print house, where a family-owned company in Anchorage that has printed my paper for 17 years, they tell me we're the only client they have that's growing. So it's just amazing to me that simply by repurposing that medium, it's viable again. So it's not paper that's the problem. It's what they print on the paper that was the problem. They were printing propaganda, and it became apparent after this last election. I think it's extremely apparent that they don't know what they're talking about. They're wrong all the time, and they're always wrong in the same direction. So that can't be accidental. But look at what they've done with the internet in the last 4 years, how they've, and I agree that the internet should not be used that way. But the moral of the story, the lesson, is that it can be. And as long as it can be, then we need to finalize that information by making it real, bring it into the real world at a local level. If there's print copies, like my paper, I can't go back and delete the page.
Yeah.
I've got 17 years of monthly publications where everything I've ever written might be sitting next to someone's toilet.
Yeah.
It never goes away. But on the internet, it just disappears. If they change definitions in Webster's dictionary, I mean, it's just absurd the level of Orwellian word games we've reached.
So you're saying, because now you're bringing me back to the traditional side of it, right? So you're saying it's important not only to put your stuff out on the internet, of course, because that's how people are consuming their information.
Right.
And I think if we don't go into the internet and make our presence known, then it is just going to be that Orwellian type system. And that's why I'm grateful for the Alex Joneses and the Joe Rogans of the world. And we're not even talking about, like, they didn't even get into that for business purposes. But you're saying don't only do that, you also need physical. Is that what
that's what I'm saying? I'm saying that the power of the local culture to express itself has been taken incrementally over time to where now you can live next to someone and not know them, but you both know the same news.
Yeah.
There is no, the whole idea of this free speech, free expression was to affect self-government. We have free expression under the First Amendment so that we can affect self-governance as a people, individually and collectively. And representative government's supposed to represent what we tell them. But how are we telling them anything?
Yeah, and it makes me think of too. I used to dabble in working for some news stations. Being a videographer, you probably get a job there or something. I worked remotely as a contractor for about 2 months, but I very quickly found out that all of your local stations are owned by 2 companies, and they go by the names of Makeascene.media and I think Gray Media is the other one. But it's very similar to like the cigarette industry, right? It's the illusion of choice.
Right.
And that's one thing I am very grateful for social media, especially here in Lucedale. We have a very, it's local. Like everything we do is local. I actually talk to people all the time and I'm like, I don't really watch the local news anymore because there's nothing really to see on there. Like they're following, Savannah, who owns the coffee shop, they run a news page on Facebook. There's even the George County Times is probably getting most of their traffic now on their through their Facebook page, even though they do have physical copies of the paper. But that's one thing I will say I'm very grateful for with social media and the internet is I feel like, imagine not having it right now. how far would we be into the age of propaganda and just sitting in front of screens? You're talking for real 1984.
It really would be. And look how close we came to that being the outcome.
Oh, yeah.
So that's my point. And when it comes to print media in particular, I think there's a particular power in print because when the corporate media, who'd you say, Raycon and Gray?
Raycom Media, and
Raycom?
I think Gray is the other one. Now,
Well,
somebody in the comments will probably correct me on that,
but they, whoever those two companies are, that's who determines what we're talking about collectively. That is not the fulfillment of free expression. It's the opposite.
it is the opposite.
So what that means is we don't know what we actually care about. We know what we're told we care about.
Yeah.
And then that has an effect on the majority of people because the majority of people want to go with the flow. They want to be part of what appears to be the public perception.
Yeah.
But-
And
but
those
it's-
for you out there who have never read 1984 by George
Definitely
Orwell, read that, because then you'll get the final destination and you can kind of reverse engineer in your head. And you'll start looking around and realizing, wow, this guy was on to something.
Yeah.
He was talking about, like, the final destination, but you can see where these things lead.
Well, and it also tells you that they aren't new because how could he have written about them
Yeah.
if
That
they
long
hadn't
ago.
already happened? People forget authoritarianism is literally author. It's authoritarianism. The whole concept is who gets to write the story? Who's the author? Who decides what is? And that's still what's happening. But it's being controlled by a very small group of people whose interests do not align with the majority. So self-governance, this republic, this representative system of government that we have isn't being fulfilled. And I think the way to do that, and I'm not talking about politics, I'm talking about culture.
Yeah.
Politics is one aspect, but I'm talking about the full expression of you and your neighbors so that you define the culture where you live.
And if you're watching this and, we're thinking, oh, I'm watching this because, I'm a creative business owner, entrepreneur, this applies to you.
Yes.
Very
absolutely.
much so, because without these freedoms, like, you can't make a YouTube channel and be successful.
Yep.
Because if they're monitoring everything, or not monitoring everything, but if they're controlling everything, there's just, and that's, dude, we could get into a whole conversation about YouTube and how revolutionary it was for free speech. Now, there was a time where they tried to get control of it and squash it, and they still somewhat control it, but it's kind of like the music scene you were talking about. Like, once it gets so loud, you can't control it anymore.
Yep.
A good example of that is the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah.
He got so loud that if they tried to squash it, they tried to buy him, but if they tried to squash it, it would have made too much. It would have exposed him a little too much.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, that's
this
true.
does apply to you guys. I'm just saying.
Well, and I look at media like what we can't do is forget the three legs of this stool. Yes, the internet is key. My company couldn't exist without the internet. I have to utilize the internet to gather all that information that I then put on paper. But then I print 10,000 copies of each edition, and we're 17,000 copies. It used to be 10. We've increased over the last few years significantly, and we're about to be at 20,000 because we're running out of papers. When I tell people that, it's hard for them to understand because all we've heard is that print can't possibly continue. I'm saying that print at a local level, at a small level, that takes that same stuff we're putting out on YouTube and makes a print edition of it, that gets it out through print, that secures that culture. It can't be buried.
Yeah.
Like everything I get is written by someone who cares about it. And then I publish it I get people on the same page, literally.
Yeah, book burning's a lot easier when you can just press a button.
Right. And that's the thing is
rather than going door to door and
the
getting all the
internet
books.
is the fulfillment of what we need. We have all the pieces. And I think the push to get rid of print is, I think there's a reason for that.
It's like the same thing, the push to get rid of cash.
Yes.
It's actually the exact same concept,
yes.
right? Because with having cash, you have complete freedom to, barter with your neighbor.
Yep.
Without without surveillance or without, supervision, if you will.
Well, what we're doing here today, I've been working for all these years to build a pathway for me to do music. Ultimately it started with me trying to figure out how to do this without having to move to Nashville and take my shot or whatever. I wanted to be a dad. I wanted to be a local person. I wanted a community. And the thought of going to a town where there's millions of people just like me clamoring for a handful of spots and ignoring my community, it just seemed silly. Like, why not build something locally that they can't ignore and create a pathway for more than just one person? When you're trying to do it all for yourself, you're forgetting that music is the sound of culture and community. It is not just yours. Everything that happened to the musician up to the point that they wrote something affected it in some way.
Yeah, and everything happens for a reason, but I wonder where I would be had we have met with the same information when I was 22 years old, trying to make it big in music.
Yep.
I do, and most people probably don't even know that I play music just because I'm so involved with video. But even movies like Almost Famous and like and then I'm the Guitar Hero generation.
Right.
Like I was 14 years old when Guitar Hero came out. And I was already playing guitar, and like the story in Guitar Hero, you're on a journey. Like the video game is like the cutscenes. You're on a journey. You start in the garage, then a record producer comes to you, and then you get in this. You go to this recording studio. You sign the contract. You start playing bigger venues. Like I didn't know any different. Like to me, that's how it worked.
Right.
Now there were some people who came along in my life, and not just people I know, but like the Sturgill Simpsons of the world, who kind of showed that they could. He was the first one that I saw go fully independent from the start, just about, and really teach other people how to do it. And then I had some friends that were in bands out of Austin, Texas, and they had their own label. And they were making full-time livings. Now, some of them were music teachers. One of them owned a pizzeria. But they were touring, doing their thing. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, so you can actually just do this. And whenever I stopped trying to make it, right? And I started just doing it, I would say for fun.
Right.
And this is how I got into video, was somebody asked me to shoot a music video, and the rest was history. Whenever I started doing music for fun, it meant more. And the songs were better.
Yes.
And it resonated with people better. And I wasn't under so much stress to you're trying to hit the lottery, really. In a lottery, you probably don't want to win.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
I always tell people, I compare it to playing the lottery or getting a job. If you have to choose between the two, most musicians are trying to play the lottery while getting another job that's not even music related.
Yeah.
Why not look at your local scene, identify a need, and start playing a role that interfaces, that overlaps with the music industry, like what you're doing. You've got the ability to record and produce video and all these things so you have this additional value that opens up possibilities for others. Most musicians are, they're a cook, or they clean streets, or whatever. It's totally unrelated.
Construction, whatever it is.
But we're told, part of that mythology is that back home, everyone has to tell you you'll never make it. Everyone has to tell you that the dream's impossible. Get something else entirely. Give up on music. So it's either make it big, that's what we're aiming for, or the harsh reality that no one believes in you and you'll never make it.
Yeah, and it actually brings, I'm gonna give a little shout out here to two Hattiesburg musicians, Thomas Jackson and Kerry Hudson. They're really good examples of guys who realized, well, if I got to get a job anyway, I might as well just play music full time. And they did the same thing. Like, they might have played in multiple bands. Thomas Jackson's also a fine artist, so he paints and stuff.
Cool.
But I know for a fact Thomas Jackson's been playing music every single night for about 30 years.
That's awesome.
And he's probably making $200 to $400 a night, depending, with tips, and he sells his art. And if you start looking at the numbers, he's probably making 120 to, and I'm guessing if you're watching this, Thomas, you might be like, I don't make that much, or you might be like, you're lowballing me. But if I did the numbers and the math, and I can tell you from personal experience too, because for a while I did music every single night when music was available to play, excluding Sunday and Monday. And my wife didn't really like it because, you're out all night, whatever. But I was making $200 a night, maybe sometimes $400. If you're playing casinos, you're getting like $800. Like, you can make a lot of money playing music. But we just don't think of it like that, because we're thinking, well, you got to hit the lottery instead of getting these little incremental things and making $150,000 a year, which is a very respectable wage for anybody. I mean, if you told anybody, hey, I make $150 a year, nobody's going to think you're living in a
you're
gutter.
doing great.
Yeah, $150 a year.
Especially in this economy.
Yeah, $150 a year is bang up. But
what you're saying is spot on, and I'll take it a step further and say, if you're good at recording your own music, you should consider doing it as a service for others.
100%.
If you're good at making video for yourself, offer it to others for maybe no money, maybe some money.
Or reasonable price.
Reasonable
right?
prices for your fellow musicians. Start working together without being in a band together.
Yeah.
Just work together, because if you look at any other industry, there's a lot of camaraderie. But local music lacks that camaraderie because they lack any infrastructure. They all have the same dream, and there's very little success to go around. So there's this competitiveness that is contrary to music itself. Music is harmony.
Yeah.
It's not competition, it's cooperation. And we should be exemplifying the lessons of music in our own lives as musicians. We should be working together. We should be collaborating in every way possible. And I think there's a lack of community in local music in most places.
100%, bro.
Alaska has a really strong music community, but I think, especially considering the population density, I mean, we've got less than 1 million people in the whole state, and it's bigger than Texas.
Yeah.
So it's very low population density. So when I look at the music community there and how vibrant it is, I'm shocked. And I think what it is people in Alaska feel separated, like they're in their own world. It doesn't feel like you're one of the states. It feels like you're way over here.
Huh, lucky you.
Yeah, it's nice. I like it. And most people in Alaska are not from Alaska.
Yeah.
So
well, you being from Mississippi is probably got a little something to do with why you gravitate towards it, because we are kind of the black sheep of the entire union, I would say. In fact, they call us the landmass, between Louisiana and Alabama.
Yeah.
But so anyway, we're not quite as remote and separated as you guys, but I do feel like we're right behind maybe Alaska.
Well, and the internet should make us feel more connected. You would think that we would be seeing a boom in community.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to the previous topic. The corporate media has no interest in decentralizing communication. They have every interest in centralizing information.
100%.
There's no money in decentralization. As a matter of fact, it would dissolve their entire influence, because their influence is contrived, it's manufactured, and then they sell it to the highest bidder, which could be any of a number of corporate entities. The pharmaceutical industry, for example, why do they advertise at all, number one? And why are they the biggest advertiser by far? They sell products that we can't choose on our own, that we're supposed to depend on doctors to prescribe because we're not doctors.
Yeah.
But they're the biggest advertising block. Clearly it's an influence buying motive, not just to influence people to ask for certain drugs. I don't believe that at all, because if you can't ask for a drug that the doctor doesn't already know about, I mean, it's just an absurd reality. So I see that and I say, okay, well, the pharmaceutical industry is massive, trillions of dollars probably. I don't know how much they account, but hundreds of billions.
I think it's the biggest industry in the world.
Yes, easily. And it's getting bigger by the day, and it's in their interest for it to get bigger, not smaller. They're not in the business of healing. They're in the business of treating.
Yep, 100%.
So the whole industry is controlled by the corporate profit motive, that if a CEO were to ignore that fundamental profit motive, they could be fired and perhaps even prosecuted.
Yeah, don't cure it, treat the symptom.
Yep.
Right.
But that's what I'm passionate about. Is it's not really even political to me. It has a political element, and that's a necessary part.
Yeah, it's a necessary evil.
But
somebody has to represent these ideas.
Right. And
basically.
And the idea that people's ideas matter is the first idea we have to represent.
I'm curious of where we are in history. Like, it's hard to tell. Retrospect is always 2020. You know what I mean? Like, in 20 years, we'll really look back and go, wow, this was the new coming of founding fathers in a way, because if you think about what our founding fathers stood for and represented and risked their lives for,
right,
it's very similar to what the people like, you know, whether you like them or not, Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Joe Rogan. I mean, these guys they're risking their livelihood, and sometimes in some cases their lives, for the ability to decentralize, you know, our communities. And I'm grateful for it, but it's just interesting to me. Like, it's almost like we're coming full circle,
right?
You know, and that COVID era was really,
what a wake up call.
I mean, for me especially, like, I was already in the camp. Right. Like, I've been in the Orwellian eyes wide open camp, but that right there, it showed me how many of my neighbors were still under a spell.
Right.
And I don't mean that in any disrespectful way.
No.
I just mean, like, wow, we really are too self-reliant on the powers that be. Really, I mean, if we just get all our communications cut off with the outside powers, Lucedale or whatever town you're in should be totally fine. We should be able just to sustain just like this, like our own country. You know what I mean? But it was just a weird time, and they pushed it so long. I couldn't believe how long we went.
They're still pushing it. I still see people with masks. Not as many.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I think they've quit in terms of the media.
Is still there.
But yeah, the spell's still there. I mean, the people who were just real hardcore paranoia, schizophrenia type. What do you call it? Somebody's always sick. What is that? Man, what am I looking for? It's a word. Anyway, those people.
We'll put it on the screen.
Yeah, we'll put it on the screen. Those people are still wearing the mask because they're still freaked out from that time period. But even people who I know personally who were, you know, all on board with the CDC and the Dr. Fauci's, they're now talking to me about, hey, have you seen this new Daily Wire documentary about how it was all a hoax? Right. I'm like, do you remember me telling you that week 2?
And don't you think this is, and this is another reason why I support local media in traditional mediums, you have people, what you're talking about are the people who have abandoned left-wing media, but have a similar relationship, dysfunctional relationship with right-wing media. And now that Ben Shapiro's talking about it, it must be real. It's the same as before.
Just flipped.
But so what you really have, when I see right-wing media, the whole idea of a centralized source of truth is the problem. There is no such thing as a centralized source of truth. We lack, as human beings, we lack the ability to not be individuals, and therefore we are inherently biased. No matter how hard we try to not be biased, we are biased by our very existence.
Yeah.
We can't help but see things from where we're standing. So when this lie that we were told, a lot of, I'll rewind the clock, but newspapers used to be the primary medium. And it was William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer who owned most of it. Hearst the majority and Pulitzer the lesser, but they were both hugely influential. And it was Pulitzer, I believe, or maybe it was both him and Hearst, who started the first school of journalism, where this is where they introduced this idea that, yes, we're all biased, but with the proper training, we can create a qualified journalist who follows a set of rules that we've trained them to follow so that they can bypass their own bias. Well, clearly it didn't work.
Yeah.
Because now we have a left-wing media and a right-wing media, and they both claim to be engaged in those same rules of journalism. So the problem was that these propagandists who owned the media at the time, Hearst and Pulitzer, they were getting a lot of pushback from all the local newspapers that they were buying up and putting out of business. They were all saying, hey, these guys are trying to take control of the entire national conversation. We're local, right? But they were doing all sorts of nefarious things, political maneuvers and everything. I think it was, the banning of cannabis and hemp greatly helped Hearst and Pulitzer because it's a simple, easy source of paper at a local level.
Yeah, and I think they were also the first guy, not Pulitzer. What was the
Hearst.
other guy's name? Yeah. He own most of the milling industry too?
He bought it up before
So it threatened his paper business as well.
Well, and people think when
you can grow it 10 times faster.
Yep.
It's a better paper. I mean, it goes
and
on
you
and on.
can do it locally in one season. You don't
Yeah.
have to wait for the trees to grow.
No,
like
30
you do with-
years.
Right. So what he did greatly affected his competition's ability to continue to compete against him, because hemp was such a vital part of the paper industry at the time. So,
in fact, during war times, they re-legalized it so they could have paper on the fly and rope and whatever it was. But
and
when it's convenient, we need it.
right, and that's the thing, is we had a cheap, easy source of paper, and then you think, how in the hell did Hearst and Pulitzer sell the idea of getting rid of one of the largest cash crops in the world? And they did it by renaming it, again, Orwellian. They changed cannabis and hemp to this new word, marijuana.
Yeah, and they put out Reefer Madness, and
they
funded all that stuff.
But that was the word to hide the real thing. Because if they had told people at the time, hey, we're going to ban hemp, people would have said, are you out of your mind? Your newspaper's printed on hemp.
Yeah, everything
Right?
is hemp.
Everything's hemp.
People's clothing was hemp.
So they lied and called it this slang term that's up to that point hadn't even been applied to that plant. It was a term for wild tobacco. It wasn't even.
I think it was Mexico was using that word.
Well, and they used that word. It was introduced from China. Cannabis came over from China, and Asia is its origin. But they convinced. I mean, there's many Americans right now who think that marijuana comes from Mexico.
Yeah.
Originally, but it does not. So they took this plant, they renamed it. If you look up on the internet, the Google has that, I forget what it's called, but you can look up the frequency of a word and its usage in literature over time.
Oh, yeah.
You put in marijuana and it's nothing until suddenly it's a huge spike about 100 years ago. And it's because the newspaper industry introduced this word. And they told people this scary thing that you don't know what it is, but it will cause your daughters to sleep with jazz musicians and Negroes.
Yeah.
That was the lie. They scared people with this lie. They hid the reality of what they were doing. And then that gave them the edge because local newspapers could no longer get the paper they needed to compete with these massive industry giants.
Yeah, it's the ultimate double talk example of the 20th century. Pretty nuts. And if this podcast is not creative enough for you by now, you're on the wrong stream, so go find something else. I do want to plug our sponsor again, because they're letting us use this space to record in, and their coffee it's straight from Colombia. It's freaking amazing. Opossum Coffee Company.com. Make sure you go check those guys out. They're not charging us for this space, and so I want to make sure we take care of them. So if you need some good coffee made here or roasted here in the United States, order it. It's nationwide shipping. You can get it in Alaska, or you could just get some before you go home and put it in your suitcase. But I want to rewind a little bit. I'm really into this conversation, but I want to kind of jump around. So tell me, because I grew up in the same hometown as you did, right? And we didn't have the internet. We were probably, you're about 10 years older than me, but we were in the prime era of centralized media. You know, when Facebook and YouTube and all that came along, it started to get decentralized. But we're the MTV age, VH1 age, right?
Yep.
So tell me about Lucedale, growing up in Lucedale, and how that was as a young person. That I don't know if you knew you wanted to be an artist or what it was, but just talk about that.
Well, for me, my teen story is a little rocky. Most of my younger years, I was in Lucedale. Then I moved from Lucedale to Stone County, and I lived there for a few years with my family. But by the time I hit 15, my parents divorced, and I rebelled. So I ended up getting into all sorts of things I don't want to talk about on camera.
Totally fine.
So I was pretty dysfunctional, got into some hard drugs and things, got off track pretty severely. Then I met my now ex-wife, and she got pregnant with our first child. And after my first son was born, I realized that I saw the world in a completely new light.
Yeah,
like,
the kid will do it.
It changed.
The kid will do it.
I felt like I walked out of that delivery room and I saw a different world than the one I left. Like, it was just such a drastic change. But the problem was, because of my bad behavior and my legitimately wrong behavior, I had a reputation with family and friends that I couldn't get away from. I knew I was a different person.
Yeah.
But the world wasn't cooperating. I saw a new world, but the world saw the same old me.
Yeah.
And I felt like, oh man, this is quite the challenge. And then as my son grew, I realized how important it would be for him to see me in a positive light. But I also realized he's never going to be able to do that if everyone around us doesn't.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that. So I thought, I need to get out of here. I need to go somewhere completely fresh, with the commitment that I'm going to be the new person that I know I am. That change of heart, I wanted it to be a change of actions. But I wanted that fresh start so that would be the perception.
Sure.
Right? And I feel like I've lived up to it, at least for the most part. So I went to Alaska, and it was a very small, Wasilla, Alaska.
Was there a lead that pulled you there?
Yeah,
like a friend, or was it just like, hey, Alaska sounds cool, I saw it on National Geographic?
Well, it's funny. Both my ex-wife's dad and my dad had already moved there. They both had. Okay. When we met,
that makes sense.
When
Grandpa's
we met,
there.
Yeah, two grandpas, and so that was the original idea. It's not like we don't have anyone there.
Yeah,
but we don't have all these people from this old life.
I've been there.
Yeah, it's not. I love coming back here now because now I've proven myself outside of here. So I don't, and it's been long enough. No one remembers those negative emotions.
There's a big buffer
right
there. Yeah.
So, but the reality is, through my own actions and choices, I burned bridges that I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And I did things that I shouldn't have done. But I can forgive myself now because I've had kids who were 15. 3 of them, and I can't imagine how they would have reacted in similar circumstances. I see young people, and it's easier for me to look back at and forgive myself. And that was really the thing that I was missing even then, was I couldn't forgive myself. I felt so bad about, once I realized how bad I was being, it was a big burden. So I kind of flipped that in my head when I moved to Alaska, and I've said, I'm going to make up for all of it. I'm going to be a community member. I'm going to contribute. I'm going to be part of a community this time. I'm not going to take for granted the trust that people tend to give you, the benefit of the doubt that people tend to give you.
What year did you move there? 02?
02.
Man, how did I get that? I don't know. That was telepathic.
Yeah.
Like, I just kind of threw it out there. He did not tell me that beforehand.
I did not.
Well, I went, okay, you had the paper for 17 years.
Yep.
You're probably there a few years beforehand, so 02. Well, that's awesome, man. That's very similar to my story, which I won't get into that either. But, me and my wife were living in Laurel, and we're actually really part of the community there. I had my video production company there. Both my bands rehearsed there. And, when there's a toxic environment around you and things happen, it's just better to get a clean slate. But I think what you said, the realization, and for anybody out there struggling with anything, like getting yourself right, the realization is the biggest thing. Because I know people in my own life that are, in and out of jail, and their family members, and they just don't even realize what they're doing.
Right.
Once you realize it, you have to be a real cold person not to want to change it.
Yeah.
But for so long, you can be just oblivious of it being a wrong behavior. And I will say, when I grew up here in Loosedale as an artist, it was not the most welcoming place.
Yeah,
right.
definitely.
Like, I have that song "County of George" where I talk about football being a
Great
religion.
Song. I felt everything, every line in that song. I felt.
Well, I'm glad somebody liked it, but there's a line in there talking about how, I don't remember what I said, but it's basically saying that football here is a religion. And I was the kicker for the football team, so I'm not above the religion, okay?
I was from experience.
I was one of the bishops, okay?
Yeah.
But, I was all over the place. But as a musician here in town, and I was doing filmmaking, but it was very primitive. We're talking with a VHS camera making stupid horror flicks or whatever. But, I remember trying to set up, or Mr. Monk would let me and my band set up in front of his music store and play. And we're thinking, oh, we've got permission from the owner. This is great. Well, then the cops show up and tell him we got to pack it up and go. Fast forward to today, we've got a stage built downtown. They have Second Saturday. We probably have a band play here in town at least 3 times a month.
Yep.
Whether it be, for the Second Saturday, or Walt Massey just had a band the other day for their car show. I mean, there's a lot more opportunities for musicians. So can you speak on that in terms of the way things have changed since you've come back?
And like you say, I was 10 years before you, probably in that when, I don't know when you started playing publicly, but for me it was around 16 is when I started getting out.
Probably, right gigs. There, 14, 16.
So, I mean, there was basically, there was a handful of bar gigs back then, none of which I wanted any part of, local honky-tonk type establishments. And, but, the type of music I do doesn't fit there at all. And I didn't really have any interest in playing hits or cover songs.
Yeah.
I eventually tried that in Alaska, but I didn't like it. But when I was here, I was purely focused on writing my own material. And most of the playing I did was in small groups with friends, occasionally a family member, but mostly not. A house party that just sort of happened, things like that. There was just so few opportunities. There was also church, which I did a few times. I sang at weddings and different things on occasion. But I think that there was a complete lack of awareness. Like there was a willful ignorance on the part of the community when it came to local music. And no one was creating those opportunities. I will say that Steve and Sharon Elkins, who owned Loosedale Music, before Monk Music was on Main Street, it was Loosedale Music. They took the Coffee Pot name after the Chinese restaurant stopped being the Coffee Pot, and they moved it down to the building it's at now.
Yeah.
And their music store was right next door, and they created a venue, and they made this there. Yeah, and they did. They would have them right up near the front windows.
That's crazy, because it had to have been closed down before, like, my consciousness. You know what I mean? Like, maybe it was there when I was in elementary school, but I wouldn't have known.
Well, and I think it was.
I would love to see some pictures of that. If anybody out there.
I might have some old pictures somewhere.
Yeah. But. That's the thing, too, with, like, social media. Right now, we can just pull up pictures from the last 10 years. But anything before that, you just about got to go to the old paper to find a physical picture of it. But that's really cool that there was somewhere you could play.
Well, and
because when I was in high school, there wasn't.
Yeah, it was short-lived.
Yeah, albeit.
Well, the thing is, I think they own 2 other businesses, so they bit off a big hunk.
Yeah.
When they opened that coffee shop, the Coffee Pot, and but they put a lot of money into it to remodel it to make it nice, and before that building, I don't know what it was before it was before they turned it into what it is now. But I think it's interesting that it is still there 20 years later. When neither of their other businesses are still there.
Yeah.
But the one they started on the side still
survived a little bit. Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, when I was in high school, there was Monk would let us. Well, that was more like my freshman year. But you know what's crazy? There was actually a big music scene when I was in high school, and it all took place in this place called, I want to say it was called Charlie's Steakhouse. If you're going on Main Street and you're going like towards Century Bank and all that, and you go out of town, not towards Rocky Creek, the other way.
Right. There's
an old steakhouse on the left. And there was like a little motel there. It's across the street from the radio station.
Oh, okay.
That old steakhouse, dude, there was a massive underground metal scene that happened there. And anybody watching this that's from Loosedale that is still watching this, and was into like the heavy metal, which I wasn't. I grew up playing blues. Mm-hmm. I would like get in the truck with my friends and we'd go do the blues trail, and we played at the Shed in Ocean Springs, and we were really blues oriented, which actually was better for us because, the people listening to that were old people with money.
Yeah.
Right. But this scene that went on here in Loosedale, I think deserves a mention because it was a massive scene, and you would go there and it was almost like a hush hush, don't tell anybody this is happening because the cops are going to bust it. But you'd walk in there, dude, and it's smoky, and there's 60, 70 kids and a little makeshift stage and just a spotlight. And that was like the era of, it's not the music that I really like, but hey, everybody likes what they like. But that's like the era of Breaking Benjamin and like that emo double bass heavy stuff. And even though it's not my thing, they were packing that little building out in secret. And I'm sure it got busted by the cops a few times, but hey, there's something to be said about any group of people getting together to listen to music.
Well, look at that, what you just said through the lens of culture. That's culture.
Yeah.
That's what it is. You may not like what they are contributing to the culture, but they are contributing.
Yeah.
And it's coming through from especially the shows that pop up without any marketing. That is like an eruption of subculture into the culture. And it's not any more real than it was before they did those shows. Just more people became conscious of the fact that this influence is happening in their own culture. And it's a little shocking to people. I ran a music venue during that same time frame. For about 3 or 4 years, I had a music venue that I started because I wanted a place where people like me could play. But very similar to the Makeascene, where I thought it was going to be for musicians, but it was artists. I thought this was going to be a place for people like me, but what it turned into was a place for people like the kids you're describing. It became a heavy metal teen venue, not because I designed it to be, but because that's who needed it.
Build it and they will come.
And you can't, just like with the paper, I'm not going to turn away all these artists because they're not musicians. I'm not going to turn away these kids when they're the only ones that seem to have any sense of local music being important.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter that it wasn't my favorite kind of music. What blew me away every weekend was all these kids showing up, paying $10 so they could stand. In my case, it was a basement in an old mall. And they would come down the stairs and they would just pack it. They'd be dripping with sweat and they would leave in love and friendship. There was never a fight. 3+ years, not one fight.
Yeah.
But we tried to foster a sense of welcoming them rather than looking down our noses at them because they dressed absurdly. Yeah. Like black clowns or something, like dark clowns.
Yeah, whatever it was.
But we treated them like human beings, and we would ask them for help regularly. We would ask them to self-police. So we never had a fight.
They knew they had a safe place to come.
Right.
And as long as they could, make sure that nothing bad happened, they were going to continue to have a safe place to come.
And in our case, the local police would come by once in a while and thank us because they said, we got all these kids that didn't have anywhere to go other than to get in trouble. And we had them all in one central location where the cops knew where they were.
And if you think about it, let's say you're doing it on Friday night, Saturday night. They don't want to get in trouble on Wednesday because they might not be able to go to this thing that they're looking forward to all week long.
Yep.
I think that's a really, really good point. And to parallel that a little bit, I'm going to double parallel it. There's a local church here that their youth organization is the bomb.
Really?
Like you walk in and they've got a space like this. It's actually Lucedale Church of God. Shout out. But you walk in, they've got a space about this size. And it looks like one of the top-notch music venues.
Really?
Like, it is the bomb. And it keeps, they probably have 120 kids every Wednesday and every Sunday. And it keeps the kids off the street. Now, it's a little different because it's a religious organization, which is totally fine. But to parallel also what you were saying with culture building itself. Right. You can't dictate that. When I lived in Hattiesburg, I would say that was like the peak of my music career because I was in a really successful band. And then I had another band that was a little more heavy, so we would do more house shows and stuff. But we had a house, me and my buddies, and we called it, and people watching this from Hattiesburg in that 2014 to 2019 era will know what I'm talking about, the Crow's Nest. And it was our house, and we had bands coming from Austin. We had bands coming from Florida. We had bands coming from Tennessee, and they would come play our house parties at the Crow's Nest. And those shows packed out so much more than any show we ever put on at the Thirsty Hippo or the Dollar Box or whatever. And it was literally, we would take all our furniture and go put it in the garage, and then it would just be the big wide open living room into the kitchen. We had it all, Christmas lights and records on the ceiling. I mean, it was a cool little setup.
Right.
And we had a projector playing like Nightmare Before Christmas backwards in
But
some
it's
other
real, man.
It was real, and we'd open the windows because there would be people outside watching. There was no room.
Right.
So we'd have people outside watching from outside,
How cool
but
is
also
that?
just chilling outside. And there was never any fights. There was never any drama because there was enough people there who were involved that if there was anything spark up, I didn't know about it.
Right.
I'm sure
It got squashed quickly.
It got squashed quickly.
Right.
And the only hiccup we did have was, of course, the cops would show up, and the cops just have to do their job. I don't begrudge them in any way. Yeah, those were the best shows, man. The Crow's Nest, and good memories too.
Well, and that's the real music scene.
Yeah.
The music scene that happens without any corporate approval. But radio, something we haven't talked about yet, but in 2018, I bought a commercial radio station in Alaska, and my first order of business was to put the best local music that I'd found over the years directly into regular rotation. And I say that as a distinction because when radio stations play local music, they tend to do it during a once a week show on Sunday night at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
They might give some airtime to local music, but radio doesn't work that way. Radio works through regular, repetitious playing of the same song.
Yeah.
People, after 3 or 4 times of hearing a song, they catch on and they either like it or they don't. Hit songs are not discovered, they are made. There's lots of potential hits that just never got radio play, so we don't know they exist. But they could have been if you'd heard it 4 times.
Yeah.
But you'll never hear a local song on local commercial music radio regularly.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to do, and take the local music scene to the people where they hear music. And the key was to have it next to their favorite corporate artists. So twice an hour on 95.5 The Pass in Alaska, and it's streamable, by the way, but we play local music from Alaska, and I curate
is
it.
in the description, by the way. Awesome. I'm going to throw it in there because I'm going to check it out. I haven't listened to it yet.
And I take great pride in that. Of all the things that I am pleased to have done in this industry, in media and music, being able to achieve that was something that I wanted desperately 20 years ago. Not just for myself. I would lobby constantly to every radio station, program director, owner, anyone that would give me their ear. I would take that time to try to make the case that they should play local music in rotation regularly. And I could never break through. So I ultimately, to achieve that goal, I had to buy a station because I couldn't get anyone to try it. Now I'm doing it, and it's working great. It's one of the many things that people love about the station.
Yeah.
And they tell me, I love that I can hear local music all the time, regularly.
Reminds me of what the folks in Hattiesburg, WSM has a radio station.
Right, college?
Yeah, it's a college radio station. But the guy who runs it, I can't remember his name, but he did the exact same thing.
Right.
He made it a mandate that
Yes.
I think there's a percentage on their website. It says 40% of the music has to be local, whether that be Hattiesburg or the greater Mississippi area. And that is if you go into Keg and Barrel, if you go to the zoo, if you frequent Hattiesburg, most of them play WSM because number one, the music's awesome.
Right.
Even just the corporate music they play is awesome. And there's another station too in Mobile called the Zoo. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I remember the zoo.
Yeah. So the Zoo, whoever's taking it over, they're doing the same thing.
Oh, are they really?
Yeah.
They're
so
playing locals?
They're playing local people and often too. Often. So
What's the numbers on that?
I can't remember. If I find, I'll go and find it because they
zoo.
also all three, yours
check
and
them
theirs, stream online. Because I listen to WSM in my house. I have fiber
Yeah.
internet, so I can just clock it on. But
Well, I think
should be a mandate. But then again, you don't want to control.
In Canada, they do have a mandate.
Really?
It's a certain percentage of broadcast material has to be Canadian content produced in Canada.
100%.
Which has been great for Canada. A lot of the famous Canadians we're aware of, they got their start because of that mandate.
Yeah.
In America, I've looked into what it would take, and I think it would fundamentally be a First Amendment because the owner of the station has the right to decide what content they want to play.
Yeah.
But I think an argument, and I'm pretty libertarian, but the FCC exists for a reason, and that mandate that the FCC has is to make sure that local people in local communities aren't excluded from local broadcasts. That's the full meaning. That every rule the FCC has is built on that premise, that we can't let these limited localized resources be monopolized by a handful of people who don't even live there.
Yeah.
Now, that's exactly what's happened with Clear Channel and whatnot, but that's beside the point. The FCC's function, but they have never made it mandatory, and I think that needs to happen. The FCC, if they're going to bother regulating for the purpose of making sure local communities aren't excluded, that should extend to content, not just advertising.
100%.
It should be
songs you're playing, shows
right.
you're hosting, whatever, you know.
They should, and I think from my experience, having actually tried it for the last few years, it's been a real help to me with getting advertisers. The local businesses, they will recognize you're doing it and appreciate it.
Yeah.
Because they understand it. Local business owners understand
the power of community.
Right. They have to.
Yeah, there's a great power in it. And like I was telling you when you got here, which I didn't tell you previously, we've only known each other for 4 or 5 days. So that's pretty funny. We're just having
the most we've ever hung out.
Exactly. But I was telling you that the last three or 4 years I've been working on a TV show.
Right.
Which is like an HGTV type TV show.
That's cool.
It's home improvement or whatever. But what's funny is I learned everything. Like I learned how to make the show. In those 3 years, I learned how to edit the show. I learned the process of taking it to the network. I learned the negotiations. I learned how much these shows, you get paid for them if you own the show. And in my mind, I was like, oh, that's the only way to do it, right? But then we just made this episode about this coffee roastery, and in 20 hours, it got like 5,000 views.
That's awesome.
And then I had local businesses, and not so local, some of them big businesses, like regional businesses, like
right.
millions of dollars in revenue a year, reach out and go, hey, how do we be part of this? We would love to slap our name on it and just, sponsor it or whatever. And so there's so much power in community that people just don't realize.
We're just not tapping into it, man.
Yeah, we're not tapping into it. I mean, so to give you another example, right? My local little TV episode that I did got 5,000 views in
20 hours.
In 20 hours. You can go look at the same numbers on Tubi at some nationally syndicated home improvement show, and they don't get that much in 20 hours. No. Right? Like that's pretty bonkers. And that's and something else that parallels that is, you got your main networks like CNN and MSNBC and all them doing the election. They're broadcasting the election. And just for curiosity, I went to all their YouTube pages and I saw, okay, they're getting 200,000 people live. They're getting 150,000 people live. Freaking Patrick McDavid is getting like millions of people. This is just a dude. I mean, he's not just a dude, but you get what I'm saying. Like the independent people who are just speaking truth and really just rallying their own community, they're getting more views. I mean, if you go look at YouTube, like some of the smallest creators in their basement are getting more views than CNN on a daily basis.
Well, and not regardless of your politics, I'm not some like Trump guy. But I don't have a hatred for him either. I see him, just like
just an old business guy.
Yeah,
that's kind of how I see him.
But regardless of your politics, one thing we definitely have figured out in the last month or so is that the control of the narrative by the corporate media is not working anymore.
Yeah.
They did not call a landslide, a popular vote, electoral college, House, and Senate. They said it was close. They said it was tight and that Kamala had an edge at the last minute. So clearly, people have to reconcile the reality that none of that was true now. So I was just reading that they've lost overnight like 40% of their viewership at CNN.
Oh, yeah.
Because 40% of the people felt betrayed. And when they saw not only did a Republican win the Electoral College by a healthy margin, he won the popular vote by a healthy margin.
Yeah.
Unheard of for a Republican.
And what's really bad for them is, the 40% they lost, it wasn't me. I was already gone.
Yeah.
It was the boomer types.
Yep.
So they're leaving, and, as life has it, they're also going to be moving on from this earth eventually.
Yep.
So they're not winning. Like, it's actually, dude, what's crazy is the rebellious thing to do right now is to be a Republican.
I know, it's so weird.
It used to be, when I was in high school, it was the opposite.
Oh, man.
But I love it. I mean, this is just how culture shifts, right?
Yeah.
And if nothing
It's
else,
fascinating.
If nothing else, I think I can safely say that Trump is an independent person.
Yeah.
Like, if nothing else, I love that about him.
Well, I did not vote for Trump in 2016 or 2020. I supported the Libertarian candidate both times, as I usually do. But that's really a protest vote. I think the only wasted vote is the vote that you make for the lesser evil. I think it's not even a vote anymore. It's a lie you're telling yourself.
Yeah.
I always vote my conscience. So I've always voted Libertarian because that was the one that aligned best with my perspective, not just by a little, by a lot.
Yeah.
Although I disagree with Libertarians on how they look at corporations and a handful of other things, everything else I usually agree with them. But after this last shift, I'm looking at Elon Musk was talking to Ron Paul on X the other day. Ron Paul is the GOAT. Ron Paul,
the Libertarian GOAT,
he was a
right?
political prophet.
See, that was the guy I wanted to vote for my first going,
Yeah, and I campaigned for Ron Paul. I liked him so much. That was the first time I ever registered as a Republican.
Yeah.
But what I saw from the Republican Party when he was doing great in Alaska, like we had such a huge support network.
Yeah.
But that was also the year of Palin. So Wasilla and the McCain camp stole the Tea Party from Ron Paul. Ron Paul's movement started the Tea Party thing. And then McCain and Palin joined forces and sort of adopted it. And they called their PAC what did they call it? The Tea Party Express, I think it was called. And they sort of just took the brand for themselves in their campaign. Well, Palin was from Wasilla. So where I lived, everything was about Palin. Palin, for a couple of months, she was queen of the world in Wasilla. And it still is to some people. I don't know her personally.
I forgot about her.
Yeah, she was a big deal for a while there. But Ron Paul was running that same year. So I was actively going to rallies, doing things, standing at 20 below on the street corner, waving signs. I've got pictures.
That's crazy.
But
that's never crossed my mind to do, but I mean.
Well, he just was saying things that at that point in my life was what I was finally hearing someone
I remember Ron
say
Paul being like, I was
great.
I pray to God this guy's the president.
He was great.
Even at a young age, because I was probably 16.
But the Alaska Republican Party, who I was joining with at that time, I was coming in under the big tent, as they say.
Yeah.
And the shenanigans and corruption that I saw to keep Ron Paul people from positions of power was so overt. And that's the first time the leadership of the party basically told the truth for once. They said, we do what we want.
Yeah.
The party is not part of your constitutional republic. That was the big lesson for me at that point. The political parties are not required by or prescribed by the Constitution. And George Washington himself warned against political parties and the danger of them becoming corrupt and then having undue influence. And that's where we're at now. And to bring it back to what you said about Trump, I think he is independent because I remember the Republicans hated him just as much as the Democrats.
Yeah, he was like a Democrat his whole life.
He was a Democrat his whole life. I've written about this recently in the paper back home, that he was an 80s Democrat. That's all he ever was. He was a Democrat until
he was a New York guy. He kind of had to be.
Right. And you look at his policies, they're still 80s Democratic policies. They're not Republican policies. The things he's doing are not inherently, they're just things that everyone wants. So both parties have promised but failed to deliver.
Yeah.
But everyone wants it. He's just apparently, the That's the irony of the situation. Because they went so far in hating him, they made it impossible for them to influence him now. So now he has this mandate where he does his success does not depend on his relationships with other Republicans.
Yeah. That's my favorite thing about him. I'll just tell y'all guys straight up, because we're 2 hours into this. I've been a Trump guy from day one, but I read his book as like an entrepreneur,
right.
You know, like The Art of the Deal, to me, other than the Bible, is probably my favorite book.
Right.
And so as long as he crossed that, and that's the telltale sign for me, as like, I mean, I've been listening to Alex Jones since I was 9 years old, probably too young, but the moment I saw the media turn on him, I said, good sign.
Yep.
Great sign.
Well, and to be clear, they were, in fact, giving atrazine to frogs, and it was shifting their gender. So when
They're turning frogs gay.
When he said that, and everyone laughed and thought it was absurd,
Yeah.
once again, he was right. We've got to separate the individual from the information.
Yeah, 100%. And dude, I never abandoned Alex Jones. So it blows my mind of people who are like, oh yeah, I liked him, but then he did this and that. And I'm like, but he's a human being.
Right. Of course he made a mistake.
For some reason, I'm just not built the same way. So I never once abandoned. When he said, hey, we're going to ban video now, we're not going to be on these other platforms, I was like, all right, cool. I didn't think much of it.
Right.
In fact, I didn't know about the SH thing for years after that. I was like, hold on, why did you get banned? I didn't know he was banned. I thought he was just moving to decentralize himself.
Right.
Which probably helped him in the long run.
Well, I think, he announced that he formally accepts Trump's offer to be press secretary. So if that's not trolling, I want you to know that I'm going to tune in every day.
Every single day,
Every
bro.
day.
Like,
it's going to be I'll buy TiVo for the purpose of watching that interaction.
the question is, does he do that from Austin, Texas? How does that work?
Well, I mean,
It could work in today's age.
they liquidated InfoWars entirely now. They shut it all down just in the last couple of days.
Yeah, I didn't understand that either.
Part of that,
what was
part of
that all
that
about?
bunk lawsuit where he owes them billions of dollars, more than the gross of most small countries. It's insane. Like, even if he is wrong, even if he does owe someone compensation, it's such an outrageous number that it's basically just destroying him. It's making an example of him for pushing back.
But liquidating InfoWars, what does that mean? Like,
All of his equipment, everything's been seized. So they shut it down recently. So it doesn't mean he's off the internet. It just means that his InfoWars studio in Texas is no more.
so where are they recording from? Are they?
I don't know.
Dude,
I don't know if they are. I don't
No,
know
they were
what the
recording
plan is.
election night. Like,
Yeah, it was after election night.
it was after election
Yeah,
night.
that's what
Dude,
I read.
I guarantee you they're all on webcams right now.
Well,
Like,
I mean,
it's not going to stop.
It's
them,
not about the equipment. It's about the information. And just like last time,
which is the irony of the name.
the Barbara Streisand effect. Are you familiar with this? The Barbara Streisand effect?
Remind me.
Or the Streisand effect?
I've heard
so
of it, but
years
remind me.
ago, in the beginning of the internet, Barbara Streisand became very upset that someone had taken photos of her large house and put it on the internet and told people where it was. So she,
Ousting, right? That would be ousting.
I don't know. I don't know the term, but but she got upset and raised a big fuss about it, which created more media and more awareness of the picture and where she lives. That's the Streisand effect.
see.
When you try to stop something, and in the process of trying to
blows it.
stop, you make it worse. That's what they've done with Trump. That's what they've done with people like Alex Jones. That's what they've done with Robert Malone, the doctor who helped invent mRNA technology. They've done this with so many people. The best thing that can happen to you is to get canceled.
100%.
You get canceled, and it's the opposite of getting canceled. It's like guaranteed.
Well, they put a spotlight on you.
Right.
They're
And
like,
it's so
hey,
foolish.
Yeah.
But
Especially with the lack of trust now with the mainstream media.
But
it's a telltale sign.
They overestimate their power.
Excuse me.
But part of their power is pretending like they have it.
Yeah.
But the pretense is thinning. We can see through it. So when they try to flex that muscle, we realize there is no muscle really. Like they take Alex Jones off the internet and we just learn a new web address.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything except bring
Anything,
awareness
it makes me
to
want
him.
to watch them more.
Yeah, exactly. That
Rebellious part of you, it's like, I can feed that.
I was more likely to click on Alex Jones content after. And then Rogan comes along and says, hey, come on to the biggest podcast in the world, buddy.
Yeah.
and just amplifies him even more because
Once
now
a quarter.
Now there's something to talk about.
Yeah.
Right now, oh, you're the enemy of the Republic now. Come on, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Now you've got real drama, real interest. They created a story. By trying to get rid of stories, they created more proof to the people that were already on board, and it fundamentally undermines the principles of liberal democracy.
It makes me wonder, like, because we've all, or not all, but we're far enough into this, we can go down the rabbit hole. I'm really into the George Orwell ideas of where, a society can go to if it's under complete tyrannical control. Could it ever get to that point?
Yes. Yes.
But the thing that helps America, right, is our founding fathers had such good foresight, almost like unbelievable.
Yeah, I think it was inspired.
It's got to be.
Well, and you got to consider that it wasn't just them. There was John Locke is probably most responsible for most of what we're talking about right now. But there were others, Montesquieu, there was Hobbes, there was all these thinkers. Mm-hmm. They were just people that had thoughts, and the printing press enabled them to share the thoughts, and they became popular thoughts. Yeah. And so the founding fathers did not invent these ideas. They activated them. They acted on them.
Secured them a little bit.
They saw this philosophical possibility. And they saw how the printing press changes everything, just like the internet changes everything. The printing press changed everything. Yeah. People didn't even read before the printing press. They had no need to because there was nothing to read, right? And the Bibles were all written in Latin. So the printing press changed the world in a fundamental way. Yeah. And that's why the word liberal, most of the founding fathers would have called themselves liberal. We misuse the word because Orwellian, but liberal means that it's the philosophy of individual liberty, and it's rooted in the Latin word liber, which means both book and free. So the idea of freedom is intrinsically tied with knowledge. Yeah. You can't be free if you don't know anything. You have to know things to make decisions in an informed way and be free. Otherwise, you're just feeling around in the dark. Yeah. The founding fathers understood and valued the written text, the book, liber. It was freedom. And they saw it as freedom starts in the mind. And they saw everything that they were doing as an expression of these thoughts. Up to that point, they were just ideas. So when they built this constitutional schema, they were able to weave all these pieces together in these rights and guarantees so that, and you can see how in this country, we've been able to defend those positions as a result. Other countries, Canada, they couldn't because their constitution wasn't as strong as ours. Yeah.
It's almost like it wasn't in the right order.
Yes.
The order is important.
Yes. Things have to happen a certain way. But really, if you were to boil down my company and everything that I'm doing professionally, it all boils down to facilitating the First Amendment. Yeah. Everything, whether it's event production, that's the right to gather together, right? That's 100%. Guaranteed. Print, when it says freedom of the press, it's talking about the printing press. Full stop.
Full stop.
That's what it means. We have a freedom to the printing press. Now, the Supreme Court has found through many rulings that extends to other mediums, but not with the same degree of freedom. Every other medium is regulated. The only medium that isn't regulated at all is print. You can do whatever you want with the printing press, and no one can say anything because it's the letter of the law, literally. Yeah. But the FCC regulates radio and television. They want to regulate the internet, and they will eventually.
And they kind of are. Like platforms are regulated, like YouTube.
And fascism is the combination of government and corporatism. It's when government and corporations come together and operate as one. Yeah. And it gives them the ability to do things they can't do legally on the government side through corporations. So when corporations tell you have to get a shot, or they tell you can't have an internet presence, that's government by proxy. Yeah. It's totalitarian rule, whether it's fascism or communism, it doesn't matter. It's the same end result, just different methods of getting there.
Well, dude, this has been a very insightful conversation, and most of the stuff has, we're just kind of rehashing thoughts that we've had for many, many years. But how this applies to the audience here is, we need as many people being creative with their First Amendment right, whether it be through press or music or filmmaking or religion. It doesn't really matter. We need, because that's the other thing too. If we have an army of creators on the internet and, out in the world, it makes it harder for those big corporations to squander your dreams, which is to be creative,
Well, and to put a pin on this, my company facilitates all the parts of the First Amendment except one, religion. And that is because that if you read the First Amendment, it's one sentence. And what did we learn in school about a sentence? It always has a primary subject. Mm-hmm. So the first clause, they're all separated by semicolons. So you have a primary clause and subordinate supporting clauses all connecting to the primary clause. This is basic English, right?
Yeah.
So the first one is religion. Each subsequent one, press, speech, gathering together, it's all about facilitating religious freedom. And by religion, they did not mean where you go to church. They meant how you live your life, your conscientious decisions. Yeah. You were free to say, I'm going to do this because my religion tells me to do this.
Yeah.
And anyone from a biblical background needs to remember that God is a creator.
100%.
We're in his image because we are creative. When we are creative, we are doing what God designed us to do and what he himself does.
Which is another reason, as a Christian, I feel like it's in the best interest to squash that if you're, the powers that be.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's I have a whole conspiracy about the masks and covering up the image.
It's symbolic.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it covers the mouth.
See, we might need to do a second podcast before
I'm all about
you
it.
Bounce out of town. We're going to wrap this one up, though, guys, and we're going to end with a performance from Josh. So give us just a second and stick around, and make sure you guys check out opossumcoffeecompany.com for all your coffee needs. They have it in 1 pound bags. They've got it in 50-pound bags if you're crazy like me. And yeah, if you're in Lucedale at any point, go to Lucedale House of Coffee, or it's actually Lucedale Coffee House. I always say House of Coffee. Maybe they should change the name. But if you want to taste the coffee, you can go there. But without further ado, here is Josh Fryfogle playing his good old guitar.
Use your words to be heard. Love comes easily. Trust and share. If you dare, love will come to be. It's the charity of being friends. It's the knowing that in the end, everything we love depends. That we would speak freely. Love comes easily. Trust and share. If you dare, love will come to be. It's the empathy of being there. It's the knowing that someone cares. Unrequited, unaware that we could speak freely. Speak freely. Speak freely. It's the decency to take the time It's the knowing how to be kind and the doing by design. When we could speak freely, use your words to be heard. Love comes easily. Oh, trust and share. Yeah.